This is becoming a major problem for the Toronto Raptors, as Darko Rajakovic is essentially treating Dennis Schroder as a guy that he is molding to become the Toronto Raptors' #1 option, especially as the trends, we're going to dive into the numbers. As the season has gone along, Dennis Schroder has been actively pushed from less of a facilitator for this Raptors offense to a guy that's expected to be a top scoring option in a lineup with Pascal Siakam, Scotty Barnes, Gary Trent Jr., OG Anunoby, heck, even Jakob Poeltl, who's been leading the NBA in field goal percentage. At least he was a few days ago. I didn't check that stat starting off this vid. So basically, Dennis Schroder is a guy that, again, I've been happy with coming into this season. Schroder is a player averaging 16 points per game, 3 rebounds, 7 assists, decent efficiency, all that type of stuff, but where the Raptors were left hanging at the point guard position when Masai Ujiri thought he was going to give Fred VanVleet $35 million per year, said we'll run it back with that group. Fred ended up leaving for an even more lucrative contract, and Dennis Schroder was brought in sort of immediately after that happened, and he's been a nice pickup. He's proving to Raptors fans that had some concerns that he can be a starting point guard for this Raptors team. And I don't want to make this video to say on any given night, Dennis Schroder, if he's cooking, if he's hot, he shouldn't have the green light to sort of get rolling, because we've seen games this season where Dennis Schroder looks really good and can take advantage of those hot streaks. But last night is sort of the culmination of him getting more and more shots and, not being efficient, not really putting the ball in the hoop, and still the ball ended up kept going back to him. He led the team in field goal attempts against the Miami Heat last night, and this was a game where Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby were cooking. Scotty Barnes come the fourth quarter, even though he wasn't efficient for the entire game. Come the fourth, Scotty really put the ball in his hands and was potentially going to bring the Toronto Raptors back in this one. And Jakob Poeltl, also efficient, only took 2 shots in this game, and Dennis Schroder had 18. So that's just the box score, but you can see how the raw, and if you watch the game as well, the Heat were giving him some more open looks. So there is context. I don't want to say Dennis Schroder was just chucking or they were horrible shots, but the strategy has to be adjusted. Again, sure, Schroder's getting decent looks. Sure, he's a good player, a starting caliber player, I'd argue. When you have players playing the level that Siakam and Scotty and all these guys were last night, that is unacceptable. But this, as I said at the beginning of the video, is becoming a trend. In the past 10 games, Dennis Schroder is currently 3rd on the Toronto Raptors in terms of field goal attempts, and only has taken 3 less shots than Scotty Barnes. So a guy that Raptors fans expect to be taking that star jump, and especially at the start of this season looked like he'd be an all-star this year, still could potentially get into that all-star conversation depending on how the Toronto Raptors perform over the next month or so. But Scotty Barnes, who is the future of the Toronto Raptors, is the president of the Toronto Raptors here now at this point, is only taking 3 more shots than Dennis Schroder in terms of field goal attempts. That is unacceptable. And even Pascal Siakam's not too far ahead of those guys. I mean, Pascal, 21 more shots than Dennis Schroder there. It's not a good look. And then also on top of it, you have other scoring options that in previous seasons have proved that they can be proper threats on the offensive end, like OG Anunoby, who hired a new agent, switched his whole agency in order to get him to a position where he'll have the ball in his hands more often, he'll be able to take more shots and prove to the NBA that he is a player that is deserving of those max slots, deserving of, that star caliber position. He is now taking less shots than Dennis Schroder. So that's unfortunate. And then also Gary Trent Jr., who is a guy that is a volume scorer. That is the one thing that he is on this team to do, except for maybe defense where he's taken steps up. He's been a roller coaster on the defensive end over his Raptors career, but he's even taken less shots than Dennis Schroder. And I get it. Gary has been inconsistent, all that type of stuff. But personally, I don't like it. I don't think this is the most optimal way to run this Toronto Raptors team. And yes, any given night we might have the ball swinging and it's, whoever offense, whatever the heck you're doing, who's getting the best looks. And sure, Schroder might be getting the best looks. But, if Pascal Siakam is having a night like he was last night, or is just proven over the course of his career, he's an all-NBA guy. OG's been a 17-point-per-game scorer consistently in his NBA career. Gary Trent Jr. has proven that when he gets a high volume of shots, he can get a high volume of buckets. These guys aren't getting those looks. The ball in this free-flowing, fast-paced system isn't ending up back in their hands, and it's keep going to a guy that, coming into this Toronto Raptors season, I mean, Dennis Schroder explained how head coach Darko Rajakovic influenced his decision to come to Toronto. They had a previous relationship in OKC. We've heard them praise each other a lot in these press conferences and stuff. Not to say it's a bad thing or anything along those lines, but the fact that this free-flowing system always ends up back in the hands of Dennis Schroder, that's concerning. That is seriously concerning for this team, and it kind of gets worse when you look at the fourth quarter numbers, because we've talked about how Dennis Schroder, again, he's shooting 35% behind the three-point line. He's an inconsistent jump shooter. It's not like the main focal point of his game, but he's a slasher. He can do things, right? There are moments where he can take shots at the end of games, but would anyone want Dennis Schroder to be taking more shots on the stretch than Pascal Siakam? Maybe the Siakam haters. I know it's polarized and stuff, but I mean, right now, Dennis Schroder, in the fourth quarter of games this season, not even just in the past 10 games, he has taken 11 more shots than Pascal Siakam in the fourth quarter of these games. Scotty Barnes, again, is the fourth quarter savant for the Toronto Raptors, so that's a good sign to see for the people that are in the Scotty camp over the Pascal camp, but definitely I think everyone's in the Scotty over Dennis Schroder camp in terms of who should be getting more shots, but more than Gary, more than OG, more than the entire roster. And personally, again, down the stretch of these games, Schroder, he's fast. I like the pace of play, but, when there's 3 minutes left, you want the ball to be sort of, everyone hates the I word, the isolation sort of plays and things like that, but the Raptors have lost a lot of games this year because during the flow of the game, it matters less because you can transition and all that type of stuff. But the reason a lot of teams in the NBA revert to sort of isolation style basketball is because down the stretch of games, particularly because when you have a turnover in the last 2 minutes of the game, when you have a bad shot, a rush shot, those are the sort of moments where the defense on the other end quickly goes back to the court and can get an easy bucket. And sure, the analytics, the this, that, and whatever, maybe there's analytics that show this, but anyone that knows, just a point, a bucket that didn't need to happen in the last 2 minutes of a game, one of those demoralizing plays, those have almost 5 times the impact in terms of how that end of game is going to go. Just a heartbreaking turnover, a heartbreaking sort of rushed missed shot, right, leading to an easy score on the other end. Those are momentum swinging. Those are just game-changing sort of plays and possessions. So teams generally like to play it safe in terms of how they execute down the stretch. And Dennis Schroder, even though he's been good, yes, he's not a guy that tends to play it safe. He likes to make sort of high-risk passes. That's why his assists, especially at the start of the year, were very high. He's been looking for those passes a lot less down the stretch now because he's taking high-risk shots. Weird sky hooks at the end of games, weird finishes, taking no hesitation in sort of three-point shots that are kind of contested. I mean, those are the types of shots that are demoralizing for your team, lead to easy buckets for the other squad, and just aren't sort of the way for the Toronto Raptors to execute. And while, again, I'm going to keep repeating it because I don't want it to sound like a hit piece on Schroder, he's been good, but he's not the guy you want to execute down the stretch. Give the ball to Scotty. Give it to Pascal. Heck, give it to Gary Trent Jr. when he's rolling down the stretch of these games, right? Like, that's a problem, that he is the number 2 option, significant number 2 option in terms of field goal attempts for the Toronto Raptors in the fourth quarter of these games. So that's a problem. Then you can also look at things, Malachi Flynn having a resurgent season. Marcel's pushing the Malachi movement, but only 6 minutes in last night's game after hitting a 3 and stuff along those lines. I mean, it's something to look at. It's something to look at. I know favoritism. People love to roast Nick Nurse and Fred VanVleet's relationship and stuff along those lines. But if this continues, and I know how polarizing people are, Pascal takes too many shots, Scotty takes too many shots, all that type of stuff, I think we can all agree that those are 2 better options to be, the focal point of your offense than a Dennis Schroder. I'm happy with Dennis Schroder. I really liked how he started off the season facilitating. Even in last night's game, Poeltl has been leading the league in field goal percentage this year. Or at least he was 3 or 4 days ago. But 2 shots for Jakob Poeltl. Even Fred VanVleet was able to find Jakob Poeltl in the pick and roll to close out last season. And Schroeder is arguably a better sort of facilitator, maestro, running that pick and roll sort of position. So, again, I want to reiterate, this is not a hit piece on Dennis Schroeder. I've been happy with how he's been playing. but how he's been utilized in the system in this Toronto Raptors sort of offense, it needs probably to be tweaked. It needs to be adjusted. We need to figure this out if the Raptors want to make a push, want to prove to this Raptors team that, Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster, this group should be kept together and maybe be added on to. But let me know what you guys think about all this Toronto Raptors news. Subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't already. I'm signing out. Cheers.